Kia ora everyone and welcome to the Education Partnership and Innovation Trust space if you're here physically in Auckland, and to those of you joining us online for this evening's CDANZ events. My name is Jane Treadwell Hoy and I'm the Executive Director of EPIT. Before we kick off proceedings, I'd just like to start with a karakia. Kia hora te marino, kia whakapapa panamu te moana. He huarahi mā tātou I te rangi nei, araha atu, araha mai, tātou I a tātou katoa, hui e, taiki e. I am, as I said, the Executive Director, and we have some great conversation to be taking place this afternoon. I'm going to introduce Lynette and she can introduce herself, and then I'll hand over to Cherie to continue, and then we'll start these slides and you'll be able to see those as screen sharing. It's great to have you here and we're looking forward to a great evening. Thank you.
Ko Cherie Pero Toko Ingoa, CDANZ President, alongside Serena Tioti, who is our Vice President. And we are so delighted. Thank you, EPIT, for partnering with us for this event and inviting us. We are just so proud, CDANZ as an organisation, so proud of Dr. Lynette Reid as a CDANZ Life member to be able to support you, and thank you for being able to offer your valuable insights from your research in terms of insights for our careers advisors to empower and equip our rangatahi. Thank you, EPIT, for supporting Lynette on this research journey to be able to produce this report that can make such transformative change for our rangatahi. Thank you, Lynette, for waving the career development flag and being so instrumental for what you're doing for our young people in Aotearoa. Thank you.
Education Partnership and Innovation Trust was started about 2 years ago as a philanthropically funded trust to really support the education ecosystem and address the inequities that occur within it. So our impact statement is fairly straightforward. We're all about collaborative multi-sector partnerships. So it's not just about the education sector doing things for the education sector, but recognising the role that philanthropy, government departments, business, tech entrepreneurs and others play in creating a transformative outcome that will enable us to have learners who thrive. We're all about thriving learners rather than just achieving learners, because as we start to look at what our rangatahi and our tamariki need in 2020, 30 and beyond, it is holistic, healthy mindsets and bodies, as well as deep knowledge and education. So we very much looking at this transitions piece of research, and we came across a couple of funders who were really interested in understanding what was going on beyond the media headlines, especially the media headlines that constantly position South Auckland as the problem and the centre of the problem. And so they generously gave us some funds, which enabled us to then commission this piece of research, because transitions for us is one of our key focus areas. Lynette was therefore able to participate in the community and engage with those who are delivering education, careers advice, and enable us to be able to take this research, communicate it, but also embed it as part of an ongoing program of work, because for us this is not about a one and done project. It's much more about how we can transform the way we think about the future career pathways of our young people. So I'm now going to hand you over to Lynette, because she's got the research and she's got the incredible EPIT of knowledge that she's acquired during this process. Thank you.
Kia ora. Thank you, Jane, and thank you, Cherie, for that wonderful introduction. E ngā mana, e ngā reo, e ngā huepa, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. E whakakahaere o EPIT, Jane, tēnā koe. I te tangata, koe hui hui nei, ngā mihi. E whānau, ngā hapu, e te iwi, nui tonu, te mihi ki a koutou. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Ko poke apoko te maunga, ko waimoko te awa, ko paikia toku te puna, ko ngāti kanohi toku iwi, no whangara mai tāwhiti a hau, Ko Reid, te pere toku whānau, ko Lynette Reid toku ingoa. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā rā koutou katoa. Hello, everyone. To the people in the room, to people who are across the moor too, thank you for joining me and others today. Today I'm going to share my research results, but I wanted to first of all acknowledge the recent passing of Professor Ronald Sultana. Ron's work is central to a lot of my philosophies and my values. And in fact, I was just sharing with Cherie and Serena that just before COVID hit, I was going to do a sabbatical with Ron at Malta University, and I was really looking forward to it. And then, of course, our whole world changed, and it just never happened. But I just want to acknowledge his very sad passing and sudden passing, and he's going to be a loss, an absolute loss to our profession. Ron had a very close affinity with Aotearoa. He completed his masters at Waikato University, and often looked at the work or models that supported an Indigenous perspective. So he's going to be sadly, sorely missed by all of us. So, moi mai rā e te rangatira. Rest in love, Ron. All right. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about the research that I completed, that was commissioned by EPIT. And it's kind of a auspicious presentation, this, because it's probably likely to be one of my last in the sense of disseminating the research results. And I describe CDANZ to my colleagues as, my people, my hapu, my iwi. I really feel like I belong, in CDANZ. I've grown up in CDANZ, for want of a better word. I've had my time on the national executive, done a lot of different things related to the CDANZ association. So I feel really connected today to be presenting to people who are all over the Motu and to colleagues here. So yeah. So thank you all for being there. All right. What I want to say first of all in this slide is a little bit about the research model that I used for my research. And I decided to look at the appreciative inquiry model. And I did that because it wasn't that long ago, Dr. Dale Furbish and I conducted a very similar research topic. It was in 2013, and here I am 10 years on, and I wondered what will have changed? What will have changed in that time? And there is something about this appreciative inquiry model that just, to me, lent itself to looking at change, to looking at how we don't just conduct research, but we actually use it to make change or to generate change. And so the appreciative inquiry model has 4 stages. It has a discovery stage, which means what is working well. And that was something really notable when I was speaking to schools, because they didn't think that what they were doing was great. They didn't think what they were doing was innovative, when it was. And the more people I speak to in presentations like this, people are like, wow, I've never heard of that happening before. So the focus of what is working well was really important for this particular research. Another stage that appreciative inquiry supports is dreaming. And that phase is about sharing stories about what you do, how you do it. And often, and I'll talk a little bit about this further down the track, a couple of schools brought a lot of people into the room to share with me the stories that they have created around their transition programs. It was amazing. So again, with appreciative inquiry, it enables that, it supports, it affirms that process of dreaming, which is sharing stories. The other third stage was design, which is determining the ideal. This is happening, but what's the ideal? What is the ideal in our space in relation to successful career transitions? You know, and I guess what I'm trying to say here is that it's important for us to get to that space. We, you know, schools, private practitioners, people in vocational rehab, we're grinding through processes. We have to get to a point of looking at what is our ideal. What's our ideal in our profession, our ideal in our practices and our strategies. So in other words, bigger picture, I guess, is what I'm saying. So design. And the third thing about appreciative inquiry was destiny. Now that was what really caught me for this approach, and that's about a hope for the future. You know, what are our hopes, dreams, and wishes? Where do we want to see career development, careers transition in the future? And I don't think we have enough conversations around that. Anyway, so that's a long story about appreciative inquiry, and I'm still in that process of appreciative inquiry in the mahi that I'm doing now with EPIT. So there's just a little bit of background about the research methodology. All right, so I had a central question. I was interested in career processes, strategies, and practices that enabled successful career transitions. And processes, strategies, practices were defined by the schools, whatever that meant to them. But there are a lot of sub-questions as well that I focused on. And again, the appreciative inquiry model, these are questions directly from that inquiry model. So it's perfect for those people who are researching. And one particular favorite of mine, which again, sort of endeared me to appreciative inquiry, was the focus on values. So what values do you and others bring to your role? And there was a lot of conversation about that. What just their support of whānau-centred, their support of their students, so those kind of values. But the question below that was particularly significant. How are these evident in the successful transitions in your school? So in other words, how are your values being enacted? How are your values seen in the mahi that you do? And how does the school support that? What about the core values of the school? So those were areas that I was really interested in. And I was interested in it because when Dr. Delphibish and I did a very similar research project 10 years ago, what we found was that career education and guidance exists on the careers person. Their attitude, their belief, their values, their tenacity, their never saying no. So I was interested in whether those values and attitudes, I kind of already knew the answer to that, was still there. Anyway, so that's the central question and some sub-questions for the research. Now we, as James said, we were commissioned to complete the research in that broad area known as South Auckland. And what we decided to do was get schools recommended. So we had organisations like CDANZ, like Kate, ACAT in this situation, MOE, Chamber of Commerce. We had so many key organisations recommend schools to us that they believed supported or personified successful career transitions. And this, 3 schools were recommended by every single organisation. So that's how we found our participants. And it created a more broader perspective, I guess, of South Auckland. And so we had schools really that were within the county's Manukau range. We had 12 schools who were recommended. 5 schools participated. And you can see the reasons why other schools didn't participate. 4 schools declined, and 1 school was unable to give permission. But what I really liked is that they all supported the research. So they emailed me and said, oh my gosh, we've got other priorities, we've got new staff. But the fact that they were keen otherwise was great. And we did get 2 schools that did not respond. So that's the number of people number of schools. So I had a total of 13 people who were involved across 3 meetings per school. So I didn't just see, I could have kept going. I could have kept going back to those schools, honestly, but it was in a restricted time frame. But just the conversations, the familiarity, the trust you build with people. It was, the coffee that I had at one particular school was just on point. So I could have gone, I just could have spent the whole year doing that, and I wish I could have. But in total, there were 13 people across 3 meetings per school, and often it was school careers and transition staff, as well as a lot of external partnerships, which was really refreshing to see Rotary represented and other organisations represented at some of our hui. So the kōrero took place either with a single career advisor as a whānau, and usually in the whānau there were those involved in the space, in the school and across the community, and then there were small teams of careers people. So it was a nice mixture, sometimes a one-on-one, sometimes a 1 with 10, sometimes a 1 with 4. So it was, the voice of the careers and transition stuff and external partners was really diverse. And I really believe that because we focused on what is working well, that's a great beginning to a conversation. It avoids blame or interrogation. So the focus on what are you doing well here? What structures do you have that support that? Just seem to work very nicely within the project and within the schools. So what I've talked about so far is the research design. I've talked about the participants that were. I've talked about the participants, participants that were involved in the research. I've talked a little bit about how how kōrero took place. I focused too on some of the research questions. What I'm going to get to now is the research, is the findings and recommendations. When we wrote up the final report for the research, I developed the research findings and recommendations around a systems framework. The systems were the microsystem, mesosystem, and the macro system. I wanted to use this particular framework, if you like, because I felt like it mirrored a lot of what was in the appreciative inquiry model, meaning discovery, dream, design, and destiny. It had that sort of movement across different systems. Plus, I also felt that the systems worked with some of our own models and careers, in particular the systems theory framework. And for those of you that have an education background, there's synergies too with Bronfenbrenner's ecological system. So that was it was another reason why I chose this. So when I talk about microsystems in this context, I'm talking about practice. Now, what goes on in a school? So it's that microsystem of a school. What do they do there? What are some of their practices, strategies, values? But it's within that microsystem. When I talk about the mesosystem, that's broader, it's broadening out, it's more the networks that school has. So it's not just in one school, it's within that community and all the other providers that support successful career transitions. When we look at the macro system, that of course is looking at that political system and how we can collaborate to create change, to generate change in careers transition. So micro, meso and macro is what I am going to go on to talk about. All right, so I'm going to start first of all with the microsystem. And just a reminder, the microsystem is what is going on in the school. Now, I read this and I think this is so obvious. It just, to me, it's nothing new. But yet it is. What I saw in each of the schools that I had the privilege of going into and the time that I spent with the staff there were strategies, processes, and practices developed and designed locally. Now I'm going to use the wonderful Professor Ron Sultana here again, because Ron talks so much about localism versus universalism. And he was always an advocate for the localized perspective, the localized worldview, rather than trying to apply a universal model, which is the one size fits all, across every single school. So, of course, what I saw were strategies, processes, and practices that were completely bespoke to those schools. Again, they didn't think that was the case. They thought what they were doing was what everybody was doing, but it's actually not the case. What they were doing was something unique and something different. And the important point to note about localization or locally developed processes is that they can't be copied. They can't be replicated. You can't replicate an attitude. You can't replicate the community that they're drawing from, that they're getting inspiration from. I like that. I like that a lot. And it speaks a lot to Indigenous perspectives too, which are very localized. So they weren't just designed or developed locally, but they were in collaboration with long-term trusted and respected relationships. And when I say long-term, these are relationships built over, 5, 10, 15 years. In one of the schools that I was in, the ex-principal was still part of the school, and I think she left, a good while ago. In fact, the careers advisor that they had, who was very well known when I was in careers, early into careers, she still stayed in touch with the school. So, these are more than just relationships. There's a history there. There's a special kind of relationship, and there's a lot of trust. And that was evident in all the schools, every single school. So this doesn't just happen overnight. And I think I've said this at one presentation, and for those of you that are a certain age, you'll remember that was an ad with Rachel Hunter and about her here. Anyway, so that was the first most, that stood out like a sore thumb. That stood out to me. I just thought, these are just things that they're doing, not just. These are things that they're doing locally. The second thing that was really significant and fantastic to see is that the staff or the external partners assumed that the pathways that they were, taking young people, taking a rangatahi down would change. And it was so normal that they didn't mention it. I had to say, so do you mean it won't stay the same, it might change? They said, oh yeah, next week it could change. So it was really just not assumed. It was assumed that change would be part of these strategies and processes. And the other thing was that there was going to be a significant susceptibility to influences. And to influences, they don't know what those influences are. They don't know how far-reaching they're going to be, but they know something is going to influence these young people in their pathways. So what I was already seeing was these aren't linear pathways. These are not here, here, and here, and here. These are all over the place. They're going this direction, they're going that direction. And for these schools, everything counted. Everything is a pathway, not a pathway defined by government entities or all the theory. A pathway is if students are moving alongside their whānau. Not if they're moving backwards, not if they're moving sideways. If they are moving together with their whānau, with their communities, that is, that's success. That's what these schools saw. But as I say, they didn't see it as anything unusual. They considered all schools are doing this. And the last one was the pathways or the intention behind pathways for their rangatahi, for their students, for their whānau, were always connected to the school ethos. So to values present in the school. Some of these were values that past senior leaders had sort of, legacies. Legacy, that's what I'm talking about. Some were around the school's whakatauki or the school mottos. And there was a real commitment to self-determination for their communities, for communities to be in control and in charge of where they are going with their rangatahi. So even if it was away from the school, there was still that connection, going on a pathway, I don't know, that took them out of the community, out of the area, there was still that connection with the school. So that was those were my most significant findings insofar as the microsystem goes. And so I borrowed this quote from an article by Brighton Pryor, standing out, not fitting in. I think it perfectly describes the microsystems of each of these schools, because they need to stand out. You know, what has been developed in the past hasn't worked. And that's a quote that one of the careers staff said. We deal with students who are failing, have failed, and feel like failures. So why would we keep on doing the same thing? So that standing out rather than fitting into a model that is a universal model. Other sort of phrases or quotes, verbatim quotes that I really like: no one left behind. That was by one school in particular, who had a very well-developed process of contacting every single student at the beginning of the year, at the middle of the year, and at the end of the year, and then again kind of through that Christmas break. So they had really made a real commitment that that's what they were going to do, to see how these students would fare along the way. Trust I will do right for them. That was from one person, a teacher, who talked about how she had worked with siblings across the years. You know, an older sibling and then all the younger siblings followed, and she had built up trust with that partner. Another person talked about time needed for conducting meaningful conversations. And of course, the fantastic thing, which is always great for an academic, is that we can match practice to theory. And that wonderful theory of ours, chaos theory of careers. Everybody's always like, what? There's a theory like that? There is definitely a chaos theory of careers. And when I taught that theory a good 15 years ago, it didn't make sense to me. I remember saying to Dale and my colleagues, what the heck, what does this theory mean? It's taken a long time for me to see it in real time, to be amongst it, but it's so very, very fitting now. And I'm sure it was, 10 years ago, but it's quite a complex theory to grab a hold of, but it was great for me to see it in practice. I was really, when I started to listen back to my tapes, I started to think, oh, I've seen this before. I've heard this before. So standing out, not fitting in. So that is the microsystem, my findings from that. Now we get to the mesosystem, and this is about the networks that the school is a part of. So it's a bit broader than just their school. It could be an example of the mesosystem could be the clusters, the South cluster, the East cluster, the North Shore cluster. That could be an example of a mesosystem. And I guess within that system, my main findings was that the role of a careers person in a school is very, very complex. And we still have people who see the career transitions as very linear, very much in a, very much normalized around going to university, gaining university entrance. And what these schools were finding that those particular examples of transitions did not recognize the social world of these students, and the uncertain and unpredictable world of work. So my main focus here was just how much the school careers role, the school transition role, school pathways role has become increasingly complex. And I don't think there's acknowledgement enough of what that requires, the resources that requires, the time that requires. So that was, that's kind of where I was at in that space. And so, again, within the mesosystem, what I'm finding here is that people are working beyond their brief. Career staff, transition staff, pathway staff are working beyond their brief. And the external partners that schools had managed to, to sort of come into their space with, were trying to support them. Because there was just so much to do and the complexities of what they were doing. And so the support one of the major things that was a support structure for careers advisors and transition staff was the school senior leaders. So it's a massive amount of support from that group. And in particular, by enacting a high trust model. So trusting that the staff knew what they were doing. They, they had the student at the centre. They had the philosophy and the principles of the school as top of mind as well. But there was a lot of commitment and evidence commitment of support from the senior leaders. Now that was that across all research and careers transition, that is always the top finding. So, we're very much in line with many other research that's been done in the past, and it was the top finding for the research that Dale and I did 10 years ago too. So, there's something in there. The other constant practice, I guess I heard, was conversations, having conversations, and not just conversations, but consistent messaging in those conversations. Consistent messaging about the role of careers, as an example, when working with whānau, community school colleagues, employers and school leaders. So the important point about that is that conversations aren't just with students. And I think many people think that that's still the case. It's a one-on-one with one student and that's it. Giving brochures, handing out information. We know, we know that is far from the reality in a school. You could have a conversation with an upset parent. You could have an employer demanding that students need to have this, and this. Or you could have an employer, really wanting to find somebody to fill a position. And you could have conversations with your senior leadership team, conversation with colleagues. And what often is at the heart of that conversation too is about the professional identity of school careers and transition staff. And reminding people that we have a professional identity, we have theories, we have models, we have ways of doing things. And it was important that staff debunk the stereotypes of the role. I know one school said that one of her objectives in conversations was to not hear students say, "Oh, I've come to see the careers lady." She was sort of wanting that to be a bit, like I actually have a name for a start. So there were small things that she felt were important to raise the profile, the professionalism of the role. And so that was part of what she was wanting to see some more mobilization for that. And the other, and of course, the increasing complexity and changing roles of careers, pathways and transitions in schools, in particular because we serve two major systems. We serve the education system and we serve the labour market system. We're the meat and the sandwich. When something goes wrong, I don't know whether we are wearing some kind of sign that says, okay, it must be something to do with what I'm doing. Nobody thinks about these two major, gigantic systems that expect so much, but don't resource the role enough to do the job that schools are expected to do. So I think there's a not that people forget, but we are caught in the sandwich. We're the meat in the sandwich. Career education and guidance between employment, the employment system and the education system. And do they want the same thing? Do they see career education and guidance as being the same thing? Possibly not. Okay, thank you. All right. So I'm on to the last system, and this is the political system. And I don't know. I was always of the perspective that if you change the microsystem, which is practice, I come from practice myself, then it's all going to be good. It's going to be okay, because if we change the practice, the way that we do things, our mindset, we're going to be okay. We know we're not okay in career education and guidance and in career development. So the macro system is where we need to pay more time, more attention to, and reward and support those people that do that for us. So the macro system is that political system. And my question is, if career education and guidance is part of the solution for education employment, which they claim we are, then what is the problem? What is the actual problem that we are the solution for? If somebody could tell us that, well, I'm sure they have in all sorts of different ways, then we might have it. We could be resourced for it. We could be, you know, change could happen. But I think it's worthwhile putting forward, and I do put it forward as one of my recommendations, that is, do we need a forum to discuss this? So that's my macro system outcome, and I don't think we should underestimate the position we're in when we are between two major systems. Sometimes we're small, our voices aren't often heard. Other times we're quite, you know, we're quite powerful and quite, we're getting a lot of traction. I think it's when it's in that space we need to work that to our advantage, which is what we try to do. So the solution apparently is career education and guidance. Great. What we have, I think, in this political space, political system, is a creation of a hybrid of career specialists, connectors. And, you know, we see it in government departments, government entities now that work in the career space. We have MSD, we have TEC, MOE, there's so many different entities, government entities, and hybrid career specialists that have been created to support, to coordinate. But I just wonder, what are the advantages and disadvantages of that? Now, is there really an advantage for schools? I know a couple of schools said it's quite confusing to see the different, you know, the different entities that have versioned out of the then government. So maybe there's something that needs to be done there, a better coordination of the various hybrid career specialists. But are there advantages? You know, are there advantages too? Are we getting, you know, are we able to pass on some of our role to, you know, to other organisations? And I've seen that happening. And it seems to be working. So I you know, I'm interested in this hybrid of career specialists or connectors. I think it's a worthwhile idea to keep in mind. I'm with many people, and particularly Lee Gray here. I think if you get it right in schools, first and foremost, the rest can follow from that. That has to be a priority for career education and guidance in schools. Schools have to be our priority. That's my perspective. I think I've already mentioned this. Attitudes and approaches are locally grown and difficult to replicate. Localism rather than universalism. I'm a favourite of that, and that's a big message from Professor Ron Sultana. And just that final question, I wonder about this because I've been in the tertiary space. I've coordinated work integrated learning at that level, and now I hear about work integrated learning in schools. And so I wonder about the question, should education teach for or about work? You know, just how do those two go? How do those two systems come together? We know career education and guidance brings education and labour together, but together to do what? Whether to achieve what? And so these were the recommendations that I made. And from my perspective in the microsystem, I think the craft of career conversations has been underestimated. I think there's a lot of professional learning opportunities that could be had there. And I like the use of conversations. It moves us a little bit away from the advice concept or perspective. It just sort of opens it out a lot more and to a lot more communities. My recommendation for the MESO system was a coordinating role to support careers, transition and pathway staff in schools. And I know coordinating roles do exist at the moment, but I'm just wondering if we need a bit more than what we've got now. Some people might say that Careers New Zealand once filled that gap. You know, and so I wonder about that, where we've been. In the macro system, my recommendation was a forum, an opportunity for us to debate what are we the solution for. And so just to share with people about where things are at now. So this was the research design that was created for right at the beginning of the research before we got going. And of course, we've done phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. And I've now been recontracted to work under EPIT to look at how we can push phases 4 and that ongoing phase. So what we're doing now is sharing knowledge. We have certainly had a good go at influencing policymakers and others because we presented this to TEC. Well, TEC coordinated a presentation of the research findings. And I think what we're looking for is a redefined picture of career transitions. And of course, what's always going to be ongoing is collaborating and building relationships, but most of all, leading and creating change together. You know, we're not going to do it on our own. We need our partners, we need our allies to support us, to understand our perspective and so on. So that's just where we're at right now. This is the last slide. And it's again a nod to Ron Sultana in one of his 2022 articles. And I think he had an interesting title. I love looking at the title of articles. It's what makes me read it. And his, which was, I mean, I would have read it anyway because it's by Ron, but this is what he titled it: 4 Dirty Words in Career Guidance, From Common Sense to Good Sense. Read that article. It's primo. So he talks about the words we speak become the house we live in. I mean, how so true is that? You know, the words we use, the notion of career as a word, the notion of transition. We have so many words, concepts in our field, but it creates the house we live in. And what we need to do is speak a different language to build a different home. That is exactly what the schools that I worked with last year and a bit into this year, that is exactly what they're doing. They're speaking a language that is their community. It's drawn from their community, and they're building a different home. And so we've had a whole lot of events this year. I've been very privileged since leaving AUT to be so involved in a lot of these that I'm just like, why don't you leave AUT sooner? Because honestly, I've never had so much time, other than when I did my doctorate, to do nothing but careers. Never have I had that opportunity again. I'm like, wow. So of course we've had our research, we've had the National Careers System Strategy and the Action Plan come out. We've had Professor Tristram Hooley who's visited, we've had our conference, Kate have had their conference, and of course Careers has built a relationship, a partnership with EPIT. So, you know, there's a lot, we are already speaking a different language. I think it's time for us to build a different home now. And we can only do that together, but those schools are already leading the way, and I'm sure there are many other schools out there. Thank you, everyone.
The next, this last slide is a bit of a promo for us, because if you want the digital version of the research report, it's available on our website under the reports section under EPIT in Action, but we will share the link to the report. And if you're on LinkedIn and you follow us, Education Partnership and Innovation Trust, you'll also see the post just got up on there with a photo of Lynette and the link to the report. You can also get it by there. Thank you, Lynette. That was an excellent presentation. Thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us on the call, and we look forward to continued engagement. We'll close the meeting now.
Ia tau te rangi Mārie, I runga inga iwi o te ao. Let your peace reign on all the people of the world. Thank you, everybody.